Hey everybody, Paul Chin Jr. here with Talking Serverless. Today I'm talking serverless with Al. Al and I met at the 2025 Atlanta Cloud Conference, of all places, and it was really cool because he was doing all this stuff about serverless, and I went to go check it out, and it was all on Azure, but I still kind of knew what was going on. It still felt serverless. So I wanted to invite him on the show because here at Talking Serverless, all clouds are welcome, man. It's all good. So with that, hey, Al, how you doing?
Hey, Paul. I'm doing great. So glad to be here. All excited and everything. Yeah. How about yourself? How you doing today?
Good. Very good because we're going to have a great time on the show today, kind of like matching up clouds and seeing if they overlap at all, right? So why don't you tell me real quick, like the latest that you've been up to, like in serverless land and in like what you're doing day to day, being all cloud native.
Yeah. Cloud native. That's really where I always like to start. Serverless is just one of those parts of cloud native that we use, right? And lately a lot of my stuff specifically on the cloud side has been a lot of personal projects, been having fun with that. In the Azure world, I like using the serverless functions, or Azure functions as we call them out there in Azure land. And been actually moving a lot of code over to yet another serverless service out there that Microsoft has on Azure. And that one's been a lot of fun. A little interesting journey making some code changes to something else. And I'm sure in a couple of years, I'll be saying the exact same thing for some other platform, some other service that they say, hey, this is going to solve all your other problems. And I'll say, obviously it will. Let's do it.
I really appreciate, how I can kind of count on things just getting incrementally better regularly, with stuff in the cloud. They always seem to want to make things just run a little bit smoother each time. And I think that's pretty cool. Even the upgrade paths that we're used to as cloud native developers are pretty simple, right? It's just like version bumps a lot of times. Is that your experience too?
Oh yeah. That is definitely one of the strongest wins, I guess, for serverless, right? Like we don't have to care about what version of something is installed. Like we still do a little bit, kind of. We have to keep up with that, but not really, right? That's all installed for us. It's upgraded for us. It is great to know that I have to go out of my way to be out of date. It's still an option, which I kind of wish that wasn't an option. We were forced, but I get it. I get it. Some companies want to be need to have that kick to say yes, you do need to upgrade, right? You do need to spend that time investing on your own infrastructure. But yeah, I do think that serverless, having all of that stuff installed for us, and us not having to deal with that is definitely one of the strongest points in that world. And kind of, when I think about some of the other services, specifically, I'm only going to speak for Azure here because I'm not an expert in really any of the other clouds. Those other, a lot of other hosting services, compute specifically, those are a lot more. Yeah, you have way more options, but you can shoot yourself in the foot, right? Like it's a lot more on prem, but in the cloud. So you get a nice API. That's about it, right? And serverless just really, really takes things further, which I think I care more from the developer perspective, and I think that's why I love it so much more.
For sure, for sure. When I'm in a room of developers, it's a lot simpler to talk about the serverless model versus folks who are more used to on-prem operations and looking for a more like traditional stack, right? Now, have you been like an early adopter of serverless on Azure? Like, 10 years ago, were you using Azure functions and that kind of stuff? Or How did you come across it recently, or have you been in it a while?
I've been in it a while. I don't know if I would call myself an early adopter, but thinking about my very first Azure serverless compute stuff, I guess, was about 7 years ago at this point. So I guess it has been quite a while. Yeah. Before that, I was using some other services on the Azure side. We have Azure App Service, which is like if you're going to host an application in Azure, that is like the a really good intro kind of thing, and it gets you very far.
Is that like the time of the past, the platform as a service, like the Heroku,
Yeah.
like the Dynamo, like the Heroku dynos, where you would kind of get compute like blocks, right? It wasn't like machines directly.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, it's that really good, introduction to cloud. It's really just an abstraction over kind of what we had before, right? In the on-prem world, if you were going to host some web application, you had, if you're on Linux, you would have, Linux and Nginx, or Windows, it'd be Windows and IIS, whichever one you're using. The Azure App Service was just that PaaS abstraction over that kind of stuff.
That's so interesting because, 7, 8 years ago is about when I started learning just programming in general. And I started with serverless paradigms, but you had already been working kind of serverful, right?
Hmm.
You were working as a professional and you went from serverful to serverless.
Hmm.
I'd say pretty early on, 7 years ago was pretty early.
Yeah, making that change, I think, is one of the things that got me like my background into a lot more cloud specific stuff. Over the years, now that I'm doing a lot more serverless within Azure, it's kind of been this gateway into forcing me to do other things that I don't want to do by hand, right? So, like, the example is this is one of the reasons that I got into a lot of like infrastructure as code, because it's something that I'm still deploying these applications, and I don't kind of always want to deploy that by hand. I would rather automate that. And so, because it was something server full, like the Azure App Service that we were talking about, that was a little easier. I could kind of just copy paste files, and one time setup, sure, it's fine. Something serverless is, depending on how you use it. I know I've mentioned the Azure function side of things with compute is. It kind of has this mix of different ways you can deploy. Some of them can be very easy. Some of them can be very involved, and I think I tend to gravitate towards what I feel is what should be the correct way to do it, which usually is just the like, let me put my enterprise hat on and decide. I guess this is what I would decide. This is a personal project. I really shouldn't be going through all this work, but here I am anyway for some stupid reason. Yeah, so that's just kind of the that opening to a lot of other cloud based things. And I feel like I went on a tangent and I kind of forgot what you asked exactly. So I don't remember if I answered your question directly. I'm sorry for that.
No, it's fine, like, because I was trying to get a feel for the transition period between serverful and serverless, and the way that you kind of described that once you went serverless, now all of a sudden you had other services that are in the cloud that were just way easier to just start picking up on.
Yeah.
It was kind of that gateway to cloud.
Yeah, it really was that gateway, because then as soon as you start using, like one of those services, right? Like, so I keep talking about Azure Functions, and as soon as I started using that, I thought, well, what other serverless stuff is there, right? If I personally, with my free time, am getting all of this free cloud compute now that I don't have to pay for, well, what else can I do with this? What other services are also free that I can go ahead and or at least free to me, right? Like, I'm not going to do anything at a enterprise company level. And so that also then led to other things, right? Like the using queues to send messages between services, and all of that fun stuff, right? And so then, as an industry, right, we ended up with these other event-based architectures, and those are those have been around for a while. The concepts behind them, like my very first programming job, we did that running on servers, right, on virtual machines. But with a serverless mindset, it's you think, oh well, this just makes way more sense because we're going to be able to scale so much easier. So I really, this whole class of problem, I just don't have to care about. Do we have enough capacity? Great, perfect. I'm going to do more serverless. I love that. That is a perfect solution to a problem I'm not going to have with my personal stuff, but I might as well play around with it now. I'll definitely be using that at work someday.
For sure, for sure. So, it's interesting that you saw it and you saw that it had enough potential for you to play with outside of work, is what I'm hearing, right?
Mhm.
And I do wonder because in our industry, like all of our audience members are developers and they're in this cloud engineering type space. We're always trying to figure out like what's the next coolest thing, and you're always either gonna like say, "Oh, I'll get to it later," or something will come across your desk that's just like too tempting not to take a look at. You know,
Mhm.
for me, figuring out infrastructure as code was one of those things. It was like, oh, this is something that is fundamental to the way engineering is done right now. I really need to stick into this. And I don't know what it's like, not doing cloud formation. So, just do you think you could tell me like what is infrastructure as code like for you? Like, are you using Terraform? Are you using something that's specific to Azure?
Yeah, I've played with a lot of those tools out there. Azure has its own thing built in. It two technically, I guess Azure Arm was the original, and then now they have another play on words, so Azure Bicep, which yeah, I know, right?
They need to have Azure Quad next.
Considering so many of the naming conventions that come out of Microsoft, that's a good one. That one's top tier from them. So, I've worked with that actually, and for the most part, it's good. Personally, whenever I do anything infrastructure as code, I always think, I want to do something that works across multiple clouds. Like, I'm sitting here talking about Azure, but I host a couple of my personal projects on other clouds. Like Cloudflare has a pretty good, uh, developer platform for their cloud. In the past, I've used DigitalOcean for their stuff. I don't think I use it for anything right now, but I could see going back, depending on the services and that kind of stuff, right? And so that's why I prefer something that will work with multiple. I like years ago, I looked into Terraform and I thought, okay, this looks interesting, but at the same time, I had heard of this other thing called Pulumi. So I'm not sure, how many people
Oh yeah,
in the audience have heard of that. Yeah, exactly. So as a developer,
that's an OG tool right there. They have been around the block for sure. I remember Pulumi as one of the first ones that was competing with serverless framework, and they did things completely differently than everybody else. Like they went with language, they went and built their own everything. So I guess you went all in on Pulumi then.
I did, yeah, completely all in.
Cool. Can you tell me about it? Like I haven't played with it in 5 years probably.
Yeah, and things have kind of changed in those 5 years. They've been adding a lot of stuff to their stuff. So, so Pulumi is. I always call it like the competitor to Terraform is like an easy way to think about what it is, right? It is an infrastructure as code tool, but where you have something like Terraform, where it has its own language, right? HCL, I think is what it's called, HashiCorp language. Yeah. That's its own domain specific language, and the way you write it is a specific thing, right? It looks like config. It doesn't run 100% like config. It kind of sort of does, usually, depending on how you're doing things. It gets weird in those cases, but as a developer, that's not how I think. That's not how I write code, right? Sometimes I want to make a variable to hold something. Sometimes I want to have some sort of HTTP REST call out to some service to say, hey, you know what? right now, let's go ahead and grab like a config variable from this completely other thing. Like that is possible to do with Terraform, right? I don't want to hate on it or anything like that. But as a developer, the way Terraform does those things, not how I think. So Pulumi is basically that stuff, right? It is an infrastructure as code thing, but your choice of programming language. So as a .NET developer, C# is my default. It's my go-to. I get to do that with Pulumi. It has a couple of other languages too, but it's that's its main draw right there. Is I get to do developer what I feel like as a normal developer stuff.
I got to look. The way you described it made me realize that I'm in the AWS bubble, and what you're describing is what AWS built and calls CDK, Cloud Development Kit.
Mm-hmm.
It's several language specific wrappers around a unified SDK to be able to provision all kinds of resources within AWS. So it's AWS specific,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a programming language first. So you can do all of those things like variables and loops and make REST calls and stuff within your infrastructure code.
So it is a separate language unto itself.
No, it is not. You write TypeScript and you use their SDKs essentially. Yeah.
Okay.
CDK. It's called CDK, Cloud Development Kit. Yeah. So it's not its own language, but they made wrappers for every language you could want.
Oh, nice. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'd heard of CDK before. I've never looked into it, mostly because the AWS is just
it's only AWS.
Not something I've really used before. Yeah, exactly. But the benefit I feel like for something like that, the CDK or Pulumi in that case is you also get to use your tool set, right? Like as a C# developer, I write code in Visual Studio, so I get to use all of the normal tools that I use. As if you're TypeScript developer, then you probably have your IDE. I'm assuming VS Code these days. That seems to be what most people use, right? Probably have a certain set of extensions that you like, all of that. Like it's just the normal set of things you use. And I'm glad AWS is really investing in something like that. Kind of wish Microsoft did something like that on the Azure side.
We'll get to cloud bashing. Don't worry. You go ahead and you hold on to that. But I did want to also talk about your development workflow. On whenever we're talking about cloud development, the idea of like what are we testing, like where are the edges, and what does local testing look like for you? Are you fully emulated locally? Are you making live calls and deploying live stuff as you're going? How are you approaching that? What's your like local development workflow? What are the tools that you're using, and what's it like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of mentioned already. I'm very entrenched in the Microsoft camp, right? So C#, .NET, that kind of stuff, Azure. So yeah, any development that I'm working on is usually going to be some C# application. Let's assume some serverless API like Azure Functions, or I mentioned that somewhat newer serverless platform would be Azure Container Apps, which is pretty fancy, I feel like. And so, that lets me do standard ASP.NET web application, that kind of stuff. So I try to keep things somewhat local. And actually, one of the cool new things within the .NET world is something called .NET Aspire, which is a tool that really helps local development in that it is really hard to talk about. I don't know how to really give it a good elevator pitch, but like one of the cool features about .NET Aspire is you can say, hey, as my application starts up, let's go ahead and start these local dependencies. So there are emulators for Azure services. There are actually emulators for other cloud services too that can hook into it. So there are quite a few for AWS included too. I don't think Microsoft maintains those. I'm pretty sure someone at AWS.
Mm-hmm. This is part of the .NET experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm like vaguely familiar with how .NET happens. I know that there's a compiler in there and that it's kind of like its own server environment as well, right?
For like hosting like the standard ASP.NET web. Yes, yeah, it has its own server.
So when you're building these like .NET endpoints serverlessly, are there adapters to make them sort of microservicey and stateless? Like they don't need a web like server running. Like is there like a HTTP interface in Azure? Like what are they called that put in front of your functions? Or is every function get an HTTP endpoint on its own already?
So on the Azure side, things are a little different. So I think so. You're talking about like how like in AWS Lambda functions, one function is its own endpoint, right? Like
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, but it definitely is its own thing.
yeah, and so in the Azure side, from what I've heard, the architecture decision was, hey, we kind of have this other thing already, like Azure App Service, the thing I was talking about earlier, right? The PaaS stuff. What if we just made our serverless platform run on top of that? It's not some completely new thing, and as a result, the benefit and also downside, depending on how you choose to look at it, is you can have as many functions run on a single application. So
Oh, while the app is bootstrapped and in process and operating, the ephemeral endpoints come up and down and scale resources behind it that's separate from like the app server, I guess.
no, it is one application. So you have one,
It is still one application.
yeah, one single application that's hosting, let's say, 20 API endpoints, right?
Okay. Okay.
So downside is, it could be a little bit more complex code or something. When you're running it, unfortunately, it's going to end up using more memory. The plus side is if you're getting enough traffic, you have less to worry about in that whole, serverless cold boot, scenario, that kind of stuff, right?
So you don't have cold boots with it, right? Because it's always running and really.
If it's being hit enough, yeah, like if this is like side projects that I keep bringing up, right? Yeah, those things go down as soon as I'm done using it, right? There's like I'm gonna get like 10 hits in 24 hours by other people, mostly bots, I'm sure. Yeah, but yeah, if you're getting regular traffic, then you don't really get that cold boot issue, right? It's just kind of always up. I don't know if you're familiar with the site haveibeenpwned.com.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So
Troy Hunt, right?
exactly. Yeah. So Troy Hunt, the guy who started it, he, as far as I know, that site still runs on Azure Functions. And in one of his posts, he was talking about it one day and saying that because of the amount of traffic the site gets, it's the functions never go down. He never really has to worry about cold boot until he does some new deployment, and that new one has to start up. But that's just from the perspective of how much traffic, and I'm sure that's the same with like AWS Lambdas, right? The function starts up, and then once it's not being hit anymore, there's some amount of time that goes by, and then AWS says, "All right, well now we're eating cost on this. We need to bring it down."
Then we'll shut it down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. That's totally the same thing there, man. So really, Azure, AWS. Yeah. Now I got to find somebody with Google Cloud. But before we do that, I want to know more about kind of like how you saw coding when you first started and how you see coding now.
Mm-hmm.
From when you got your first like software job, what were the things that you were experiencing then, and then like what are the things that you're really experiencing now, like so many years later? Because you have about double the amount of time that I got in this business, and I'm just curious what I have to look forward to.
Oh boy. Oh, you're not gonna like this answer. So
Nah,
when I
just give it to
started,
me. I take the real answer. I think everybody listening wants the real answer anyway.
Yeah. The real answer is when I started, it was so much fun, right? I'm here, I'm making stuff. This is cool. I remember my very first programming job worked on fixing some bug, and a couple days go by, and my manager said, "Hey, by the way, we're deploying your first fix tonight. It'll be running on the servers and at 3 a.m." I thought that is so cool. I made a real change. All this other code that I've been writing before that, I mean, that's all throwaway, right? That was school. This is the real world. It's so cool. Here I am trying to do some math 15, 16 years later, something like that. It's the reason I'm balding, I'm pretty sure. It's a lot of meetings, right? And I think really a lot of that is gotten to that point in my career where you have the meetings, you have to do the research, right? I don't get to do the fun stuff as much as I used to. And that's the reason for so many of my side projects. I have, looking over at my desk, I have like a couple of these, like little, Arduinos or little single board computers, those kinds of, Raspberry Pi, that kind of stuff. And those are just so much fun to program because it is a physical device. Just making lights blink, little LEDs like turn on and off, so cool. So just I'm seeing it. It's great, and I miss that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% in building physical electromechanical devices. It it is wonderful. It's like I guess that's what other people get when they garden, you know? Like I can't garden. The rest of my family gardens and they pluck beans and cabbage out of the ground. And I'm like, I don't know, but LEDs, they are my world, you know?
Yeah. I have the same thought process. Like I would like to learn to garden, but I feel like it's just a exercise in learning that I would be very bad at it. Following directions, I'm sure I would do the directions right and still.
It's a pace thing. The plants go at their own pace and you got to match the plants. See, you and I, what we've done is we've matched with the clock frequencies of the machine. We got to reassociate with the frequency of the plants before we can recognize them. But that's another thing. You know, for me, from when I first started to now, 8 years later, it's like I had no idea what I was doing. I can't believe they hired me. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing until much later. And then now I can finally say, like, oh, I understand some stuff. This is nice. Like, I'm not completely over my head every single day anymore. That is nice. That's where I'm at.
That is, yeah, and yeah, we all go through that, I'm sure, right? I know my first couple of jobs, I just felt completely overwhelmed, and I thought, oh no, they made a mistake in hiring me. They probably should have hired the other person. I'm gonna keep showing up and try not to make these mistakes. And now time goes on, we make less mistakes. We've learned not to touch that stove after touching it 4 times, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I can recognize it. I was sitting with somebody new to JavaScript today and walking them through uh, how to just build REST endpoints. And errors come up, and I'm like, oh, this is a JavaScript error. We just need to do this. And I thought to myself, like, yeah, 10 years ago, my mentor did that for me, and I thought it was magic. I was like, how did you know that? How did you know that the error was like putting a bracket there? Like, because at that time, that's like completely mind bending stuff, you know? Um, and to bring it back to the cloud world, it's amazing just how accessible this massive amount of compute is to just, more or less normal people.
Yeah, definitely.
Did you feel like the stuff that you were doing at work really pushed what you were doing on the side, or was what you were doing on the side pushing on what you were doing at work? How did you make that uh, play out for you? Because everybody kind of does it differently.
Yeah, I think it's kind of both, right? On one hand, if you're doing side projects, then hey, this is a thing you're interested in learning, right? You're playing around with it. You're thinking, hey, let me try to make this thing. And even if you're not able to use it at work, you at least have that knowledge right now for maybe some other time, right? Some other point where you can suggest, like, hey, I've done this before. I think it would be great in this situation. Let me try to convince you, right? And then the other side of things is, if you're doing something at work and maybe you think, hey, this is cool. I think maybe I can apply this to something else. And then that leads to some side projects. Like one of my first uh, side projects that I mean, it's basically abandoned at this point, but something that I thought, hey, this is a really cool thing was I stole an idea of kind of an idea at work of, we were having some issues with the performance of our application, and then we thought, hey, well, we should probably like pay for a tool to load test some stuff, right? Load test our servers, run that, figure out what we need to fix. And then I thought, well, what if I just made my own load testing tool? What would that look like? And then it was not a great tool, but just for fun, I went and made that using Azure Functions. That was actually the first project I used Pulumi on to deploy those functions to multiple regions around the world to just hit a single endpoint, and that was cool. Learned a ton just from doing a project that no one's ever going to use.
Yeah. Only one more set of ports before you DDoS someone, right? Like that's all the difference is.
Yeah. You got to be careful with that. But there's other tools that are probably easier to use that you can DDoS someone with. So I wasn't too worried. But yeah, you gotta put that disclaimer on the site at least. Yeah, like don't do anything illegal.
I mean, it is cool because you had the idea, and then what is your alternative to creating your own load tester, provisioning a bunch of boxes by hand, right? And like loading Linux onto all of them, even if you script it all, it's like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of stuff to take care of still.
Yeah, and starting them all up at the right time because you don't want to pay for those to be running 24/7. Like at a minimum, just starting each box and making sure it's on. Yeah.
So all of your tooling, and you're kind of like doing all the serverless stuff. Anything from Azure that's like, you kept mentioning this newer app service. Can you tell me a bit about this newer app service?
Yeah, Azure Container Apps. Yeah,
Yeah. What are they like?
a lot of people in the cloud world, I think, love Kubernetes, and I think this one's going to be a little controversial. I think personally, if you're choosing Kubernetes, you've made a wrong decision. I'm not saying Kubernetes is bad. I want to be clear.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you it's not that controversial.
Oh, cool. I talk to different people then. That's good to know.
It's not that controversial.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, and Kubernetes as a technology, great, right? But it's so complex, it's so complicated, and you can do all of the serverless stuff, like all of the things that we like about serverless within Kubernetes, and I think that's one of the other reasons people like it, right? But again, it's so complex. You have to update it, right? It gets what, one or two updates a year. You definitely don't want to fall out of date. I've seen that problem before. That's a hassle.
The Helm chart ecosystem is interesting, pun intended, navigate, right? And by the time I finished figuring out Kubernetes and doing it and building the interface that we need to get through to this other service through the clusters, I realized like you're just reconfiguring your own cloud inside of the cloud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what it felt like to me, because I had to like stand up all new gateways, all new DNS, all new routing inside the clusters, like between the clusters, and then poke a hole into the AWS network. So it was a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it brings us back to infrastructure as code, or sorry, infrastructure as a service. That's basically what it is, right? You have these long-lived things, and you don't want to touch them the wrong way, or everything could break, and you end up with that fear. And we're right back to just running full hardware, physical hardware on-prem, right? That's basically the same concept.
Yeah, it feels like when Uber announced that they're going to have a revolutionary new thing where you will go to a specific spot where a specific car will wait for a specific number of people and then drive along a specific route, aka the bus.
I like this idea. Above ground might be a bit much. Like maybe they could do something similar, like underground, and you can just go directly, like in a circle, basically. If they ever get planes, that would be cool too. Yeah, instead of having to own a personal plane, you could just do that. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Plane share.
Hmm.
Why aren't we billionaires yet, Al? We got these good ideas.
Hmm.
They're just holding us back.
Yeah. Someday we'll get there. We'll get there. I believe in it.
So do you okay, let's see. What else about Azure? I think it's time to start ragging on clouds. I feel like we've been too nice to them up until this point. It's been 40 minutes and we love serverless, we love the cloud. It does so many things for us, but honestly, how much does Microsoft just regate open source technology with the fee on top? Because that's what AWS does.
I've heard that about AWS. I'm gonna be honest. I'm not too sure on the Microsoft. Like, I know they do it. I know, like, they keep pushing uh, their Cosmos database, that whole cloud hosted database. And I heard someone once tell me that was originally based on some open source code, but has since been edited heavily. So I'm not sure about that. But I will say that one of the things with Cosmos is that it has multiple APIs. And so if I am very used to using the Mongo API, I can go ahead and talk to it with that. Or if I'm used to the Postgres, SQL API, SQL essentially, right? I can go ahead and use that. And so that that it there ends up being like this translation layer, so you're not technically, but I mean, you're still using it, right? Like that's pretty common. I think I don't remember how many different APIs that database has, but I'm pretty sure most, if not all of them, are some kind of open source thing. I'm I would bet.
Because I mean, Microsoft in the enterprise land was known for selling, licenses to run the internet servers, the IIS servers that ran the databases and the app servers. Like, or I mean, no, people aren't still paying for like .NET runtimes, right? Because it's all there's like an open source core now that you can use. Is that what you're mostly working with these days?
Yeah, yeah. .NET has actually, that's all free, or .NET itself is has become free. It's become open source. The SDK, the runtime, all of that stuff. Microsoft's plan with that, I guess, is, hey, if we give this stuff away for free, then we can convince them to stay using our stuff, our cloud, and that's where they pay, right? You still pay if you're gonna host on Windows. You still have a higher fee than if you're hosting on Linux, still in Azure, right? Same thing with. I don't think there's a separate license for IAS. I think that's just included, but I guess that's Windows Server, right? So that would be a little higher.
Yeah, SQL servers in there too. Like if you buy proper SQL server. So one of the things that okay, so I'm gonna say something about AWS, which is no matter how long you've been working with it, in my opinion, I always will pay way too much in CloudWatch logs because the way AWS is architected, right? I enjoy their backbone, which includes like instant calls to all these delicious services. But the only standard out that is shared among them is this thing called CloudWatch, and it's its own web service that just receives the standard out line by line in a web page table, right? And there's a lot of to do in wrangling, monitoring, logging, observability, and all that. How is it on the Azure side for those kinds of things?
Yeah, cloud costs scare me. No matter what cloud you're using, right? It is so easy to have that fear where, like, yeah, I've tested this in like a local dev environment, your internal dev environment, and it only costs $20 to run that per month. Oh, perfect. Now let's hit it with some actual load. Okay, well that $20 turned into 40 grand just for this one service in a month. Okay, we didn't plan that right, and I'm always so scared of something like that happening. Yeah, Microsoft, in Azure we have our own or a similar thing for observability, and yet which is also its own. Like no matter where you go, that's always like one of the scary things, right? Just logs of data because it's just ingesting so much information.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have application insights is what it's called. I'm sure it's very similar, same concept, right? And yeah, that's another one where
Because they're ephemeral services, like because there is no box for us to SSH into. There are only a handful of APIs that they will give us. Otherwise, we have to just log everything line by line to get any visibility into these service things that we love so much, right? And everything's great as long as you're within those service levels, right? For an SQSQ, it's like don't go above 256K. You know, as long as you're below that, everything's kosher. Everything's, just perfect.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean any thing where you're charged based on usage, I'm always scared. Right? I mean, application insights in that case, no matter, like I'm just always going to be worried about that anyway. But anything else where you can go and look at the price of something, and if it tells you, hey, you can go ahead and run this database, and we're just going to charge you $20 an hour. I think I'm glad it's not my credit card. That's a company one, cool. But at least you know the cost there. If it's something else that says, well, we're going to charge you based off of your how many executions, right? Like in the serverless world, you get the first 1 million invocations for free. Like, hey, that sounds great. The next million are probably only like a couple of dollars. I haven't done the math in a long time. There's a price calculator that Azure has on their website.
Yeah. You can, like 10, 15 million invocations a month are not out of this world anymore, and it's still just like cents. It's not. So the compute they give away, they figured they can give the compute away because it's ephemeral, it's stateless, like they can reuse and recycle, but the logs are stateful. Logs are expensive. Logs are heavy. They belong in a place and they got to be there, right? Your compute doesn't have to do anything aside from what it's supposed to do right then and there. So it is funny to think about the cloud economics. Speaking of cloud economics, like they're like on the AWS side, there's people famous for cloud economics and all of that, just to deal with these pesky business technology things. I don't know. You're so in your day-to-day role, you're not really into like having to show like total cost ownership and ROI on, the technologies you pick and all that, are you?
Thankfully, no.
Or not directly, yeah.
Yeah, not directly. In my job, sometimes I will do some research. We'll have to do proposals, and then that has to go through a group of people, and then they tear it apart, and they say, "Okay, cool, do it again," and I'll do it again, and they'll say, "All right, cool, it's better now." We were going to approve it before, but we just wanted better documentation. Like, all right, fine. You could have told me that the first time. But yeah, it's mostly on that proposal side of like, hey, I think this is good. This is why. If they ask for a cost, I can say I am going to need more information from you on usage, and then they'll say never mind. So that saves me some work, which is nice.
Good to hear. It's the same no matter what cloud you're in. Building is building, and requirements gathering is all the same. All right. And, with that, Al, it comes to my favorite part of the show where I ask the hard hitting questions of the day. Now, after I've connected with you on LinkedIn, I saw that your profile pic had the Infinity Gauntlet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my question for you is you get to pick one Infinity Gem. Which one do you pick? And what do you do with it?
Oh man, this is that is too much power. That is no human should have that power. I don't know.
You get one.
I get one. And I think about it, time would be cool because then I can look into the future and see what's happening and maybe visit, and then I can say, hey, for a code application, I guess this is a better solution. So let me go ahead and do that. But then I'm not living, I'm not learning, I'm just getting the answers. I don't know if that counts.
Right. Exactly.
It's too much. I'm just gonna go teleportation. That's the space gem.
Okay, you're gonna go Space Gem. Just pop in and out.
Yeah, just easy. Let's just keep it easy, right? I don't have to own a car at that point.
Silver Surfer it, I got you. I got you. All right. Well, I mean, you came to a decision a lot faster than I expected for someone who has the gauntlet, has probably thought about it way too much. And then I also have to ask, those are Power Ranger size behind you, aren't they?
Yes,
Are those like replica,
yes.
like screen replicas? I've never seen them. Like Hasbro?
Yeah, so Hasbro, yeah, I could talk about Power Rangers for way too long. So yes, behind me, I have a couple of Power Ranger toys that now that Hasbro owns them, they were making some toys for a while called the Lightning Collection, and so they were making the toys of the weapons of the original Rangers for a while. So I have all of the ones that they made, which are
You got the axe, the Black Ranger axe that turns into the gun.
so that's the problem. I don't have that because they never made that one. So they never made the axe for the Black Ranger. They never made the bow for the Pink Ranger.
I know what I'm doing now. I gotta make a Black Ranger axe gun now. Done. Sold. I don't know what it has to do with serverless, but we were definitely talking, and how I just am so thankful to have met you. So I met you at this cloud conference, and it was mostly .NET people, C# people, and Azure people, and there were only like a handful of AWS folks, but it was all still good, still chill. And, before we go, I want to tell our listeners to go check out your website, programmeral.com. Is that right?
Yep.com.
Programmeral.com. You go to that website. It's wonderful. He has these comics that are just great. They're just funny. And on top of that, it's a real homepage, like you personally made it, and it looks like a person's real webpage and not just another social media feed or my like cheap knockoff link tree where I have all my links in like one place. You have like a real website.
And I want to be clear, what Paul means by that is it is very ugly, and I'm okay with that because I designed it. I didn't use a template.
I would describe it, as postmodern brutalism. You could take that.
Okay, I think minimal works too, but yeah, postmodern brutalism. Sure, I'll pretend I know what that means. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a good thing to say. Well, Al, is there anything else our viewers should know about you, what you're working on, where they can find you, hit you up?
Yeah, that website, Programmer Al, that's kind of the best way to find me. If you care about social media, I have direct links there. Blue Sky and LinkedIn are the two I use. I actually just recently started posting some YouTube videos on how I like to add a lot of extra strict things into ASP.NET applications, for like code coverage and that kind of stuff, and adding extra rules. So that is kind of ongoing. I think by the time this airs, it'll either be mostly done or maybe already done. I'm not sure how many episodes in total I'm going to make. I'll just keep going until I run out of ideas. But yeah, the links to those YouTube videos are also going to be right there on my site. Yeah.
Awesome. Definitely be sure to check his stuff out. And you go to do you have any other conferences coming up towards the end of the year? Before the end of the year?
No, I'm actually empty right now.
Oh, you're all done for the season so far. Yeah.
I wish I could say that. No, I'm waiting on a bunch of rejections. I'm sure I'll have a few more, but at this point, yeah, I'm just kind of waiting to see who else takes a gamble on me.
I know you had done a couple, and I'm real glad that we met at one. And I wanted to thank you seriously so much for coming on the show and chatting with me today. We kind of wandered all over the place, but for the longtime listeners, I think they'll enjoy the banter. People listen to us while they're, just taking a walk and listening to my soothing voice. It's great. It's wonderful.
Yeah. I do like your voice. I agree with that. Yeah.
Well, cool. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching today's episode of Talking Serverless with Al Rodriguez, where we figured out that all clouds are kind of the same and all programmers enjoy the same kind of stuff, nerdy things, and going to conferences. So, with that, this episode is proudly presented by Serverless Guru. Definitely check out Serverless Guru for all things cloud native implementation, development, and strategy. It's more than just consultation. So give us a shout, Serverless Guru. And with that, may your caches clear and your DNS resolve. Thanks, everybody. Bye.